Elite Facts presents
8 differences between the show and comic The Walking Dead. 8. The Dixon Brothers. Let's start the list with something a bit obvious but still a significant change from the comics. Anyone who reads both the comics and watches the show knows that both Daryl and Merle Dixon didn't exist in the comics. In fact, they don't even replace any characters in the comics. They're something Robert Kirkman made specifically for the show, and surprisingly, they stuck with both comic fans and fans of the show. Hell, Daryl Dixon is arguably one of the show's best characters and has risen to a prominent position in Rick's group. Not to mention, Merle Dixon had a huge impact in the 3rd season of the show, playing the governor's right-hand man, no pun intended. Gotta say, for characters that weren't a part of the original source material, they sure did make a lasting impact. 7. Shane's lifespan. So one thing a lot of fans of both the comic and show will realize is that the climax of the show's first season was drastically different from the climax in the first volume of the comic. The end of the show's first season was at the CDC, in which both Rick and Shane managed to get through the season without a scratch. In the comic, however, the first volume ends in the forest near where the original campsite was, with Shane's meeting his demise from Carl shooting him through the neck, causing Shane to choke on his own blood and die, or die from blood loss, pick one. In the show, however, Shane doesn't die until the end of the 2nd season, when the group is on Herschel's farm. Shane's death scene plays out almost exactly the same as the comic, only with a few changes, such as the scene taking place in the middle of a field rather than in the middle of a forest, Rick being the one to initially kill Shane with a knife rather than Carl being the one to shoot him in the neck with a gun. And Shane does reanimate as a zombie, only for Carl to shoot him right between the eyes. In the comic, however, we don't see Shane as a zombie until issue 15, or volume 3. Fun fact, John Bernthal, the actor who played Shane, requested that his walker should be the only one to talk, as he wanted him to say Rick's name after he reanimated. We know it's pretty dumb, but Bernthal did also suggest that the gun Shane was aiming at Rick should have no ammo loaded in it, thus essentially tainting Rick's moral compass. That version of Shane's death sounds like it would have been amazing. 6. The governor had plenty of missing limbs and was Hispanic. So, sanity-wise, both governors were crazier than a bag of hula hoops, so there's no change in personality. However, 2 of the most significant changes in the governor's appearance are that in the comic, he's Hispanic and missing a few limbs, whereas in the TV show, he's white and is only missing an eye. Let's also not forget his exit from the show and comic, as they both exited their respective forms of media differently. In the comic, the governor is killed by Lily after she witnessed the death of both Lori and Judith Grimes. Realizing the governor is a disgusting excuse for a human being, she shoots the governor in the back of the head and kicks him towards the walkers, allowing nearby survivors to make their escape. In the show, however, the governor meets his demise after attacking the prison a 2nd time with a new group. He engages in a fistfight with Rick. Just when it looks like the governor is winning, Michonne stabs him with her sword, temporarily immobilizing him. Moments later, after Rick's group escapes the walker-infested prison, Lily walks up to the governor and finishes the job by shooting him straight between the eyes. Between the eye and eye patch. 5. Rick lost a hand. One of the most significant changes from the original source material is the fact that Rick Grimes has managed to keep both of his hands throughout the course of the show so far. Emphasis on the so far. You never know what's going to go on in the mind of Robert Kirkman. However, almost as soon as Rick and his group arrive at Woodbury in the comics, the governor callously hacks off Rick's right hand. Personally speaking, keeping his hand is probably for the best, as it may make the show look unrealistic in terms of combat, as reloading a revolver with only one hand must be the biggest pain in the ass. However, it's a show about the zombie apocalypse, so it's pointless to even bring realism into the conversation. 4. Dale. All hail Dale, the lord of Hawaiian shirts, bucket hats, and that trusty RV. Like, seriously, who didn't like Dale during the first 2 seasons? He was the group's moral compass who was just plain lovable. However, fans of the comic know that Dale dies way too soon in the show compared to his comic counterpart. In the show, a few walkers ambush and disembowel him as he takes an ill-advised walk through the fields. In the comic, however, Dale's demise is a more prolonged affair. Dale would continue on past the farm and get bitten by a walker at the prison, resulting in him losing one of his legs and then getting bitten again before being kidnapped by cannibalistic hunters, at which point he loses his other leg before finally succumbing to the infection. If some of these plot points sound familiar to those of you who watch the show, you probably know that Herschel is the one who gets bitten and loses his leg at the prison, and Bob Stuckey is the one who gets bitten and loses his leg to the cannibals. It's crazy how one actor can drastically change the events of a show.
3.
Carol is a badass. So for people who've only watched the show and have not read the comics, everyone sees Carol as a cold-blooded badass who won't hesitate to kill you if she even senses something's wrong with you. Comic readers, however, will know that Carol's character in the comic was essentially useless. In fact, if Carol's character was anything like her comic counterpart, she would have died back at the prison during Season 3. In the comic, Carol maintains her weak and timid personality throughout her tenure and ends up killing herself during issue 42, volume 7 of the comics. She killed herself by feeding herself to a walker. Kind of ridiculous, really. Now compare that to Carol from the TV series, who was transformed after the death of her daughter Sophia in Season 2 and turned into a stone-cold badass who you wouldn't want to mess with at all.
2.
Sophia. Speaking of Sophia, remember when Rick and company spent a ridiculously long portion of the second season hanging around Herschel's farm, accomplishing nothing and occasionally searching for Carol's lost daughter Sophia? Yeah, that season did drag on quite a bit. However, things started to pick up that season when Sophia was discovered by the group as a walker in what was admittedly a heartbreaking scene, right before Rick blew her away with his trusty revolver. Well, the comics pan out slightly different when it comes to Sophia. For starters, Sophia is still alive in the comics, at least up until the production of this video. In fact, not only did Sophia not die at the hands of a walker or Rick, she's one of the few members of the original Atlanta group who hasn't died in the comics at all. After the death of Carol, Sophia is adopted by Maggie and Glenn, and after Glenn's death at the hands of Negan, she goes to live with her adopted mother in the relative security of the hilltop. Before that time, she essentially acts as Carl's pre-puberty girlfriend, but they're clearly too young to truly be interested in each other. In the comic's current storyline, several years down the line, Sophia has matured into a young, seemingly well-adjusted teenager. Again, quite a far cry from the TV show, but at least the TV show gave Carol the backbone to survive through the apocalypse.
1.
Okay, this last one is a pretty big spoiler for those who haven't seen the most recent season of The Walking Dead, so this is your last chance to turn this off. Okay? Alright, here we go. Negan's victim. So let's be honest, we all saw it coming. Comic readers and TV show watchers all knew it was going to be Glenn. What we didn't expect, however, is that Glenn wasn't the only victim of Negan's wrath. In the comic, it was just Glenn who unfortunately got his skull done in by Lucille. However, Negan's initial victim in the TV show is Abraham, who managed to survive past his original death in the comics, as he was supposed to die at the hands of Dwight and his crossbow instead of Denise. But in the show, Abraham was the first to get killed by Negan. After a small altercation between Daryl and Negan, Negan unexpectedly strikes Glenn with the bat as the scene plays out almost exactly as it did in the comic, with Glenn's wife Maggie and the group breaking down in tears, and Rick promising that he's going to kill Negan. Even though we knew the end for Glenn was coming, the scene still managed to take us off guard. Now, we believe that counts as our offering for this week. Let us know in the comments below if we missed any differences between the comic and the show. And thanks for watching.
Don't forget to like us and subscribe for more Elite Facts.